So, seeing this in front of an audience, what was that like?
This is actually the first time I've ever seen this pilot.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'd never seen it before. And we shot it almost 10 years ago. And that was crazy to watch that. I actually, it was like really seeing it for the first, well, it was the first time I saw it, but I didn't remember the plot. I didn't remember what my character did. There's a lot of nuances that I think you have to be a little older to understand and for things to be funny to you. And I was 19 at that time. And there's a lot a 19-year-old doesn't understand about working, the working class and adult humor. And, I don't think I understood a lot of what was going on, which says a lot about me. But that was the first time I saw that, so.
So how does that work? They don't send you, or you just didn't watch it after the fact,
no,
or?
I think they just didn't send it. They just didn't send it to us. I mean, they just called and they were like, "Yeah, HBO's passing." And we're like, "Okay." And I think other people probably paid attention. This was my first TV thing ever. I had done a couple of independent films before this, and this was the first pilot that I ever did. And it was HBO, so it wasn't like traditional, pilot season or kind of the way that networks produce pilots. It felt a lot more like a film. They weren't really around. They weren't on set. They weren't, it wasn't a sort of network presence. It was sort of, I went in and auditioned for Richard and Rodney Rothman, the writer, and they gave me the role, and I showed up in Austin, because we shot it here, and I stayed at the Driscoll. And that was it. I mean, it didn't feel much different than shooting a film, really. But it was my first TV experience.
Which had to make it disappointing when they said no. Or did you, or you're 19 and you're just like, I'll go do something else?
Yeah, I think like as soon as I got the phone call, I was still in college. I was in college when I was doing this, and I was actually shooting this at the same time I was shooting an independent film in Yuma, Arizona, and I was finishing up my semester at USC. So when I got the call that they weren't going to pick this up, I had applied to do a semester abroad. And I was really bummed that I wasn't going to get to do my semester abroad. So when they said it wasn't picked up, I'm like, awesome, I get to go abroad. So at 19, I just saw the positive in it.
So take me back. You do a couple of things, then Rick finds you how? I mean, an agent? How do you wind up auditioning for it?
I have no idea, actually. At this point, I was 19. I had done Real Women Have Curves, which was an HBO film. So I think that was probably the connection. Like, people at HBO thought, they knew me, and they thought, well, is there a role for America in this or something? And then I went in and auditioned, and they gave it to me. I knew very, very little about the way the TV industry worked, or the way the movie industry worked at all. I didn't understand that the people who made TV shows could be the same people who made movies, and I didn't know what HBO was at that time, and I knew what HBO was, but I didn't understand its significance in the industry, and I was pretty blind and a little, ignorant to the ways of the industry at that point, which is fun, looking back, thinking I literally was just there having a good time, and I just spent all my time with Retta Surly. Retta's the big black cook. And she just turned out to be a really good friend for a long time. So that's what I took away from it.
Had you seen Slacker or Dazed and Confused or any of those movies?
Yeah, I'd seen them growing up, yeah. But I wasn't necessarily the target audience for that. But I know who Richard was. I knew that he was sort of a fancy director, and that was fun. But I wasn't particularly kind of a rabid fan or anything.
So you're in Austin, you're staying at the Driscoll. They said they worked on it for 2 years. I guess post. Your time involvement was what? A couple weeks?
Oh, yeah. I think just about a month at most from auditioning for it and being done with it. But at the time, Rodney Rothman, who wrote it, who's now a big, he's a producer on all of Judd Apatow's films. He wrote for Freaks and Geeks, and he wrote for Undeclared. He was 29 when he got the script produced. And knowing what I know about television now, it probably did take them 2 years to get this to a place where it was in production. And probably, incredibly disappointing for him to get the call that HBO wasn't. But instead, it was between us and Entourage, and they picked Entourage. So they probably, they probably made a pretty good choice there. But, I don't know. I thought this was pretty funny. It'd be fun to see where this goes. I could watch a few more episodes of this. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
Did they tell you anything like, well, this is what your character is going to do? I mean, in the future, should this get picked up? I mean, did they give you any of that kind of direction?
Yeah, I remember Rodney talking to me then about a few directions he wanted to take the character. I don't remember any of them. That was so long ago, I'm sorry. Richard Linklater was supposed to be on this panel, and he's in Greece, so you're stuck with me. And I don't remember any of those.
That's why we're going to do like another 3 minutes, and then you can all go.
But I can talk in general about my television experience. But, I think at the time I thought I would never do TV, because I was in college, and I was young, and I was doing films, and that was fun, because you'd be on location for a couple months, and then, I wanted to finish school so I could do a film, go do a semester, do a film, and I was enjoying that. And I didn't think TV was anything I'd ever want to do as a young person, because it requires a big commitment. And if this got picked up, we would have all had to move to Austin. And I was born and raised in Los Angeles and lived there my whole life and was in college. And so I did it because it was fun and I liked the part. And my agents were telling me the people involved were super fancy. But kind of everything in me wanted it to not get picked up, so that I could go abroad and finish school and stay in LA. And
so psychologically, you ruined this thing.
Yeah, I think it was my fault. I think I put that out in the ether. But looking back, of course, if this had gotten picked up, I would have never been available to do Ugly Betty, which was the show I was on for 4 years.
Well, if this had gotten picked up, I mean, there's very few reviews of this, for instance.
Right.
But I found one last night that said this was a star-making vehicle, potentially for a bunch of people. That they looked at this pilot and they were like, that there could have been breakout stars out of this.
Yeah.
So things could have been very different.
Yeah.
I mean, in that, there's no Ugly Betty, but you could have been a star out of this thing, in theory. Is that weird to wrap your head around? Like that, it's the path not taken kind of thing.
Yeah, it is funny, because you think things happen the way they're supposed to happen, but maybe they don't. Maybe this was, this would have been a whole other path, and it would have been, great and fun too. But I really loved the character. What I loved about it was that she was in this environment, and I think at 19 I was a pretty, I was pretty sheltered. I had never smoked pot at 19, or I'd never. Not
then you came to Austin.
And I was a really good student, and I, wanted to take AP Calculus, even though I was on set, like making movies, and I think that it would have been really. What I loved about the character was she was so naive and sheltered in this very kind of dirty world, right? It was all kind of dirty. The people, she doesn't even understand that the truckers are hitting on her. She's just pushing the Fandango's. So it would have been fun to see her grow up as I grew up and realized more and noticed more what it was about. But, just watching that opening sequence, knowing what I know now about the food industry and, the education I've received on kind of the corporate food industry, it would have been really, I think actually this show could be great now. Like if they remade the show and put it out there about what's happening with the working class and what's happening with the bottom line and the corporate greed and the kind of, disgustingness of corporate food. I kind of want to see this show now. It would be really fun.
It doesn't seem like a show made 10 years ago.
Right. It's sort of really ahead of its time for 10 years ago.
Which is probably why it didn't get picked up.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, can you look at it from a TV point of view and go, well, I know why they didn't go for this? I can't, because I don't know what HBO's thing was then. I mean, clearly they went for Entourage, which is a completely different show, and I think at the time they had Sex and the City, and I mean, I think this is a really smart, cerebral show, and at the same time, I'm speaking completely out of school, but I would say that their target audience is pretty, above the line educated people who pay for those subscriptions and watch their shows, and this is more appealing to, I think, people who have an idea of what this experience is like, working 2 jobs and, having to steal food from the kitchen for your lunch, and, just sort of all the kind of
demeaning and dehumanizing things that happen in jobs like this. You know, I don't know if that's appealing to people above the line. I mean, it's appealing to me because I've been on that side of things. So
apparently, according to I guess they did a screening somewhere else, and Rick told the audience that there was one guy at HBO who apparently couldn't relate at all to that life, and was just like, oh, that's those places I drive by on my way to Palm Springs, and like just didn't get it at all. He's the guy that killed it because this didn't relate to him at all.
Well, that's the thing about television is like, you know, it really is kind of a miracle anytime anything really good gets on TV, because you're doing it by committee, and it really only takes one person on the top to be like, no, I don't get it. I don't get this. And like against their better judgment of, well, there might be millions of people who do, and your ratings go up, and like despite your own lack of relatability to this, can't you see that like millions of other people might relate to this? And so sometimes it's appalling, the kind of short-sightedness and the narrow-mindedness of people making the decisions about what gets on TV and what doesn't.
And it's not even what gets on TV, it's within an episode itself. I mean, they can come back and be like, we'd rather it go this way.
Right.
Some guy that's not on the set.
Yeah. You know, and then it could just be, you know, they know who their audience is and what's going to appeal to their audience, you know. I don't think I'm smarter than them, but sometimes it's shocking, you know, how they're, even, you know, you would think in cable television they take these big risks, but they take these big risks in relation to what they know will work on them. So it's really not a huge risk in cable TV to be, you know, have lots of sex and cuss a lot. And, you know, this was relatively kind of tame and sweet compared to some of the stuff on a cable network now.
Did you learn anything from this that, I mean, it's all part of the preparation, I guess, but for Ugly Betty, I mean, was there an experience from this that you carry to that, or is it just you did television?
Yeah, you know what, I would say, okay, so one of the things that Rick really wanted to do was shoot only night shoots, because we were, it was the graveyard shift, right, overnight. So he wanted to only shoot at nighttime, which doesn't make any sense, because your actors are tired and crazy, and I mean, try staying up only nights for, you know, 14 days. It makes you insane. And they could have just blacked out the windows, and there's nothing there that, like, when you're inside, that it has to be dark outside. I mean, that's the magic of making TV and film. You can make it whatever you want. But the shooting only nights kind of kept us all crazy, and then the last night of shooting was a 21-hour workday. And I remember thinking, I mean, it was shocking to me how many hours people worked in television, and that was just a precursor to what was to come for me. So I think when I worked on this, it opened my eyes to like, wow, this is work. You know, this is really work. Because in independent films, they most of the time don't have the money to work more than 12 hours. So you work 12-hour days and you go home. And then in studio films, they don't, you know, they have the money to extend the days at the end, so they're not pushing you that long. But TV's a machine, and they got to get it done, and they got to get done on time to air, to edit, and they got to get it done on budget. So I would say that of all the mediums in film, television, and theater that I've worked across, being an actor on television is probably in terms of hours, like the hardest job that you could take in TV. And that's true for the writers, that's true for the directors. TV is a hard gig.
So after that 21-hour day, you wanted this to fail.
Yeah, I was like, get me on a TV show.
Well, that's the other thing, is that then it's, how do I get a TV show? And you did, just a couple years later.
Yeah.
I mean, did you take all that into account? Like, this is, A, I'm going to do network television, B, you know, which is going to put that film thing on hold for a while. Did you make all those decisions going into Ugly Betty? I mean, clearly you did, but...
Yeah, I don't think it was that thought out. I mean, I think this experience actually made me feel like, well, I really don't want to, you know, move somewhere I don't want to live, and so, you know, it's a lot of work, and so I doubted that anything would come my way that I would want to do so badly that I would take all those kind of terms and conditions. But then Ugly Betty came around, and I just fell in love with the character, and I fell in love with the story, and that is really, you know, I had all these rules as a young person, like I want to do this and I want to do that, but the truth is good content is rare to find, and it's very rare that it's going to fall in your lap and it's going to be right for you, that you're going to want it, that they're going to want you, and so when it comes, you've got to take the opportunity. And so something I thought I'd never do, which is be on network television, was, you know, it was just so clear to me that, you know, I wanted to tell this story and be that character. So all those sort of terms and conditions fly out the window when you're in love with the story and you're in love with the character.
Are there other pilots you did?
No, this was, no.
So you've got this and you've got the pilot for Ugly Betty.
This and then Ugly Betty, yeah.
Huh. I mean, that's a lucky situation, I would think.
Yeah, and very unique experiences, because like I said, like this was very much the creative, you know, at least we only heard from Rodney Rothman and Richard Linklater, like that was the creative team. And then doing a network pilot is a whole different story. I mean, you're doing 3 days of just camera tests of what your wig looks like and what your braces look like, and do they want to add, you know, pimples to your face, and do they not, and like 10 people are in your wardrobe fittings, and like it was a whole different experience to be the lead of a network pilot, because you've got everyone's say on like, do you like that color on her, or are these the pair of earrings you want your lead actress wearing? You know, it's a whole different experience.
But in that sense, those people are more vested because they made those decisions than maybe the HBO folks who were like, oh, go do your thing and we'll judge it later. Right? I mean, these executives for the Ugly Betty pilot, they've got a stake in that because they decided what your braces look like.
Yeah, but sometimes it's sort of unclear what the investment is in. Is it in the creativity of the show, or is it in the, you know, what makes sense for the network? You know, what makes sense for the show isn't always what makes sense for the network. And sometimes the network's hand in every minor decision really chokes the creativity out of things sometimes. And like, for instance, on Ugly Betty, you know, the wardrobe was such a huge part of that show. The look of the show, Richard Shepard, who's a filmmaker and who's also directed other pilots, he's a director on Girls right now. But he was our director for the pilot of Ugly Betty, and he, you know, created this look for the show that at the time really wasn't on television. I think when Betty came out, that was one of the kind of defining factors of it was this look that you hadn't seen in a 1 hour kind of comedy drama, not really sure what it was. And the wardrobe was a really, really big part of that. And our wardrobe designer was Pat Field, who'd done all the wardrobe for Sex and the City. And it can be argued that the wardrobe was Sex and the City. And she fought a lot of big fights to get certain things on Sex and the City that people didn't understand. They just didn't get. They're like, why would she wear that? That's ridiculous. That looks cartoonish. You know, cut to, like, that Carrie is now kind of the fashion icon of, you know, my generation, definitely. And, you know, you want to be able to take these risks to establish the look of a show, to establish a character, to make the character kind of pop in this way, but you're fighting sometimes the fears of a lot of executives who just don't get it, you know? So it's and it does not to paint the network as like, you know, a certain evil, but certainly I would think that most of the time, giving the creative team the freedom to take risks and be daring is what makes good television. You know, I think on all the shows that we love so much on cable TV are shows where there are creative heads who have a big say in what happens on their show, and they, you know, they don't take the notes of what your actors are allowed to wear on their network.
But I'm not even sure that was the culture 10 years ago. I mean, that now you have those. Now you have those showrunners that are so powerful and get to make those calls.
Right.
But I don't even know if 10 years ago those guys existed.
You're probably right. I mean, cable. I remember when, because Michael C. Hall and I have the same manager, and Michael C. Hall had been on 6 Feet Under, but HBO was the only sort of scripted cable network at the time that any actor would dare do a TV show on. And Michael C. Hall was sort of the first actor to take a lead in a scripted series not on HBO. And it was sort of like eye rolls and sort of like, oh gosh, that's the only thing he could get. And my poor Michael C. Hall, he's on an AMC show, right? Or Showtime, whatever it's on. You know, cut to every actor and their mother wants to be on cable network. And you're right, that was merely like 7 years ago. So 10 years ago, there really wasn't that home for a showrunner to kind of to really have a cinematic approach to making television and letting it be the director's medium or the showrunner's medium, the writer's medium.
One of the interesting things just so far about this festival is that I mean, you could have some bit part on Scandal or whatever it is, and you're a celebrity here because you're in people's homes in an intimate way different than a film actor. I mean, there's something about TV that creates a connection with people on a celebrity factor different than film. And I mean, I'm imagining you saw that right away with Ugly Betty. I mean, how quickly was it life-changing?
Pretty quickly. I mean, pretty quickly. I was walking in New York City the day after Ugly Betty premiered, and I went from being able to, stand on a street corner and, sit on the subway without anybody, and I did films at that point too. And but something about film actors, this is my theory, is like people see film actors and they just sort of like revolve around them and they go, oh my God, that's that person. They don't go up to them. But when you're on TV, people come up to you and they grab you. And they're like, oh my God! It's like what you're saying, it's this sort of, you feel like you have a control over your relationship with the person on television. They're in your living room, and now with the way people watch TV on their iPads, on their computers, and we can binge watch TV and control, I watched like 13 episodes of a show and, I get addicted and I'm watching hour after hour, and then you get to pause and, go to sleep and then wake up and be like, oh, I want to go see my friends again. And you start like watching that TV show. So you really do develop this like personal relationship, and it becomes such a big part of your life that when you see them, it's like, I have a whole relationship to you that you don't know about. So there is this like thing that happened that scared me a little bit, where people feel like they, in a way, they know you, they sort of own you, they have this relationship to you, so they do a lot more touching and a lot more hugging and a lot more, which is fine, but with its boundaries. But TV is a completely different beast than animal. And I have to say, like, one thing that I really, once Betty was done, I went back to watching TV because, again, as I said, the hours are so brutal that you're so tired you don't have time to, when you're not making TV, the last thing you want to do is go watch a show. But when the show was done, I went back to watching series and catching up on this great show called Mad Men. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. Like, I was in a cave forever, and then I remembered, like, oh yeah, this is the experience of watching TV. Like this amazing feeling of like being invited into this world that's so unique and so defined. And I made a promise to myself then that I would never stop being an audience member, even if I went back to making it, because it is such a special experience to, have that personal connection to a story that evolves and you build relationships with the characters. And so I don't ever want to lose perspective of what it feels like to be an audience member again.
But you're able to do that even though you know how the sausage is made? I mean,
yeah.
You know what's happening.
Yeah, and it actually becomes a little bit more magical because you're like, wow, they really pulled that off. I do know how that's made, and it still made me feel what they wanted it to make me feel, and that's really special. And I'm addicted to these storylines, and I'm addicted to these characters, and I know how the sausage is made. But I also had a really great experience making the sausage, so I don't have any kind of bitterness towards the way the sausage is made. It's just a lot of hard work, so you come to kind of appreciate it more.
So this Pedro and Maria thing, is that happening? Is that, what's the story? Because this is a pilot, right? So it's Romeo and Juliet. Take people through that.
Yeah, well, it's a show that, it's Ben Silverman, who was one of the producers on Ugly Betty, who then went to go run NBC, but then, sold his company Reveille, then left NBC, and now he has a new company called Electus and is producing TV again. Brought this idea to me, and it was about modernizing Romeo and Juliet set in Manhattan. And at first it was young kids. They were really 15, like original Romeo and Juliet. And we'd set it up at MTV, and we got a good writer attached, and we got to a certain place, and then all the regime at MTV switched. The president left, and then they were like, no, we have a whole new mandate. This doesn't fit into our new mandate. So then we were homeless again. then sort of what we had developed for MTV, which was so specific to MTV and its audience, couldn't really find a place outside of that. So it was like, well, let's rethink this and rethink the whole concept. So we got a completely different writer on board, aged the characters up to their late 20s, made it much more about their relationships to their families and their. And so we're still in the development process. I mean, it's like you said, 2 years to develop a show and get it into production is fairly a short amount of time. I mean, you can have TV shows being developed for 10 years, 15 years, You hear about shows like Sopranos that got passed on by every network, until there was a place for it, when they began making the show, HBO didn't even do scripted TV. So, one particular TV show can have a very, very long life. So in terms of Pedro and Maria, and you only get one shot. Like, you make it, and then you introduce it to an audience, and you get one shot to connect. And that depends a lot on, did you find the right home for it? Did the network you're on promote it the right way? Were you able to get the right creative team around it to really give it its best shot to connecting to its audience? And so you want to take it slow. So when it does come out, you're setting it up to really connect. Because if it doesn't connect, then all of those years of work are sort of this. They're like, they end up getting screened at ATX, which is not bad. But.
So it's where now?
At the moment, we're still in the writing process, the creative writing process. And there's sort of more more words have come out about it than really is appropriate for the level that it's at. But people get excited and they think, oh, this is the next thing that I'm doing or whatever. But
now, do you want to do TV again?
I would be completely open to doing TV again if it was the right thing. Yeah.
I mean, how does that work now for you? I mean, what is that process? So you've been on this hit show.
Yeah.
Do you go audition for stuff? I mean, how does that work? I don't know.
Well, it's funny because, yes, like every season there's a number of pilots that yes, when you've been on a hit show and you were nominated for awards and won awards, like, yes, people don't think you're a commodity, you could get a TV show made. So they offer you pilots, but then at the same time, some writers will come to me at a developing phase and say, we have this idea, this story, we'd love to develop it around you. Or you just have network executives saying, what do you want to do? What are you interested in? Let's see if we can find it. It gets more complicated because it's less of just, yes, I want to do this. Yes, no, I don't want to do this. It becomes more of like getting ingrained in the process from a very small, when it's just an idea, when it's just a seed, and that you can go down a road with something for a couple of years before you realize, oh, this isn't really turning out the way that you expected it to. So now it's not just reading a pilot and deciding whether or not you want to do it, although there's some of that. There's also investing to get to a point where it's probably not going to work out. And then, I think for everyone, these days TV is now where kind of cinema is happening. TV is where the good and interesting ideas are being made, and everybody wants to do TV. So if Guillermo del Toro is doing a pilot for, TNT or whatever, and there's one female role, then chances are a lot of actresses who have starred in their own TV shows or think that maybe they should be getting, offers, are out there auditioning for these high-level jobs with, high-level creative people. And so there really is no sort of, place where you're safe, where you go, oh, I did that, so now I'm just going to sit tight and let the opportunities come to me. You have to keep working for them. You have to keep auditioning and proving, especially now that TV is flooded with, the type of creative people that are now on television.
So these film actresses are gunning for your job, and you were there first.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, a lot of actors.
You know you do.
What?
You hate them.
No. Well, no. Anyway, next question.
This is completely random, but out of the late night television shows, and you've done them all by now, multiple times, which one's fun? I mean, which one, because you can't tell watching these things, Which one's actually fun to do?
I've actually always had fun doing Craig Ferguson's show. I don't know if you guys have watched Craig Ferguson, but he's really fun and really loose and crazy, and you forget that there's people watching you, and he's like really fun. That's all I'm gonna say. If you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say it.
So that leaves open the possibility that some of them are not fun.
Some of them are just really stressful. You know, when you grow up watching, like, you know, David Letterman, and, you know, you just want to pull your hair out because you're now sitting next to David Letterman, even though he's really a really sweet guy. But it is stressful because, you know, you feel a lot of pressure to perform. I mean, and I think you can watch a lot of people really tank on those shows because they do have all that pressure, and you're like, oh, they're trying so hard to be so funny.
And you've got to be yourself, but still sell whatever it is you're trying to sell.
Right, and then there's all the nerves of just like people are watching you, and you're sitting next to someone who you grew up watching and who you know, love and admire. It's not fun. It's not fun. Yeah.
All right, let's take a couple questions from the audience. And I can't see anything because of that giant bright light, so I just see hands over here. So let's go with you right there.
So I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about some of the projects you are working on next? Some of the films you're doing.
Well, this year a film called Chavez that we just finished will be coming out. Diego Luna directed it. It's about Cesar Chavez, the union organizer. And Michael Pena is starring as Cesar Chavez, and I play Cesar's wife Helen, and Rosario Dawson plays Dolores Huerta, and so that'll be coming out later. I just completed an independent film that I produced as well called XY. We're in the editing phase now, and so that will be coming out later. And I'm kind of in the process of developing a few TV shows, Pedro and Maria, which is sort of the furthest along, and others that are sort of germinating as ideas. So. And I actually am, so I sort of told a little lie before. I said that I was still in college. I'm actually still in college. I had been in college, and I was very close to graduating when Ugly Betty came around. And then, you know, I couldn't do both. I couldn't finish school and be on the show. So I took a 6-year leave of absence. And I came back, and I'm finishing my last 3 classes actually right now as we speak in summer school, and then I'll finally be done with college. So I'm working on that.
Yet you're already getting credit online for having graduated college.
I did. I walked.
That explains it.
I walked in graduation in May, but that wasn't the whole story. I'll be done in August.
Okay, I see you. That's good.
So, between Real Women Have Curves and Ugly Betty and Sisterhood of Traveling Pants, where you have this really amazing dynamic with 3 other young actresses that you don't see anymore, do you feel pressure to be a role model for female empowerment? Because it's just not there anymore in the under 30 crowd. There's all this, you know, let's take a model or a TMZ star and put them in a movie and see how famous they can become. Do you feel pressure to be a role model at this point for the younger generation of women coming up that just want to be real on TV or movies?
I think it's interesting, the idea of being a role model. I mean, I think at first I had no idea what it meant. And I had done a lot of films where people really took to, you know, kind of the strong female aspects, like Real Women Have Curves, and then Ugly Betty, and then Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. And, you know, I think that as I grow up, I just feel the obligation to myself to just be the best person I can be. And, you know, if that translates to, you know, inspiring, you know, women younger than me or women my own age, then that's great. And that's fun and exciting, and I'm glad for it. And, you know, I know that when I watch things that make me feel inspired, I'm really grateful for them, you know, and I know that they weren't made, you know, they're not always made in mind to inspire me, but if there's something inspiring in it that I can take from it, then that's wonderful. And if I've been a part of certain things that have done that for someone else, then that's great. You know, something like, I just did a documentary that aired on PBS called Half the Sky. I don't know if anybody has seen that, or it was this amazing, beautiful documentary. As proud of that as I am of anything else I've ever done. And that was more of a specific, like, I'm going to use my voice and my platform to bring attention to something that I really care about. And when young women come up to me and say, I saw Half the Sky and that changed my life, like, I'm pretty proud of that, because that was really with an intention to do just that. Try and inspire young people to use whatever platform they have to bring attention to the things they care about. And that's not to say, like, for Ugly Betty, Ugly Betty, we had a young boy on the show who was 11 when we started. He's 19 now and at NYU and driving me insane. And he was, he was my gay nephew on the show, but he started kind of pre-sexual at 11. And the amount of people who have approached me and him and us and have just talked about what that character did for them in their life, ushered them through their own coming out, or, a parent trying to understand their own child. It's really moving and wonderful to be a part of entertainment that in some way really gets to the heart of a conversation that needs to be had, So it doesn't have to be the only reason you're doing something, but if it's part of it, then that's awesome. And Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, those 3 girls are still my best friends. And I think probably the strongest message that the 4 of us as, somewhat visible actresses have given is that we're 4 women who have supported each other through our careers. We love each other, and we've been, we've been there to help each other and not compete with one another. And so I think that that's a positive message, and that's great too, but, we didn't force a friendship to be good role models. We just were friends, so.
Stand up, maybe I can see some other people. Go ahead.
You mentioned that if this series had been picked up, you may not have gotten Ugly Betty. Is it possible that someone may have seen you in this series and that might have contributed because they saw you there, or what else contributed?
I'm fairly certain they didn't see this.
Because nobody saw this.
Nobody saw this. The producers had they had seen Real Women Have Curves and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and that's sort of what they. And I still auditioned for Ugly Betty. I still had to test for Ugly Betty at that point. So it wasn't like a straight offer or anything.
There's one over there that I couldn't see before. Go ahead.
So you mentioned that you were producing XY. I mean, are you transitioning more towards like behind the scenes work, or is your focus still as an actor?
It's a little split now. Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing about acting is, when I was younger, I would have done anything that came my way, anything, and without very much of a filter. I would have just been glad for the opportunity. And now, I can reserve my acting energy for things that I really, really care about. But it's like, so what do you do in the meantime? Because the things that you care about don't come through the door every day. Things really worth doing as an actor. So filling up that time, I now have the time to get to do things like create content that I really care about as a producer, or even as a director. I'm looking towards directing a few small projects, web series, short films, and that sort of thing. So yeah, and I think that it is a sort of natural cross. I would say working on the TV show, some of my favorite directors, and you're working with a new director every 10 days, is our ex-actors, ex-actor directors who, ex-actors who are now directors. Sometimes, those were some of my favorite directors to work with on the show. Tom Verica, actually, who is one of the directing EPs on Scandal. If you guys are going to go to that panel. He was an actor. I think he was on American Dreams and then transitioned into directing, and was one of my favorite directors that we had on our show. So I think there is a bit of a natural crossover from being behind the camera and being an actor, where you have very little control over sort of how things come to you or when things come to you. And I think there is this natural place where most of my friends, at least, who start out as actors, really realize pretty soon that if you want to be doing things that you really care about, then you're really going to have to take the reins and start creating some content, and not sort of sitting and waiting for something you care about to, come through the door, or, get that phone call.
I saw one more before over in that section that I can't see.
I was just wondering, with doing Chicago and Bethany, was there always a desire to do some theater after TV, and I believe it just not allow you to do that at the time, or
Yeah.
what was kind of the transition from TV to theater?
Yeah, I started out doing theater actually as a kid. I'm not any kind of professional theater, just a lot of bad Shakespeare, and like we had this thing called Festival in Southern California. The Drama Teachers Association of Southern California hosted these festivals, and students would like self-edit and self-direct, like just sort of some of the worst theater you've ever seen, but it was really, really fun. And so I grew up on the stage, and then when I started working in film and TV, it really takes away from, you know, the time. Theater is a time commitment. You know, you're doing at least a couple months. You know, so you know, really being able to say I'm going to stop and do this thing, it's a commitment. So I did, when Betty was done, I did really turn an eye to, oh, I miss being on stage, and I want to do that. And I have gone back to stage. I did Chicago and London, which I'd never done a musical in my life, and then I went and played Roxy Hart in London, which was amazing and a terrifying experience, but it was really fun. And then I just recently did Bethany in New York, and I know I said TV is the hardest in terms of hours, and it is, but in theater is its complete own other mind fuck. Like kind of showing up and doing the same play over and over. It's a whole other muscle as an actor, and when you've been away from it for a long time, it takes a while to build that muscle again of, oh, I'm going to go in every night and do the same play over and over and over again. So they're all so different from each other, and I love all of them, and just as soon as I get sick of one, I get to move to the other, so it's fun.
Let's get one more question. I think, yes, there's a hand here.
A lot of your roles have been a mix of drama and comedy, so either it's lighthearted like Ugly Betty, but it has dramatic aspects, or it's dramatic like End of Watch, which you're amazing in, but also is really realistic, it had some humor in it. But do you ever have an interest in doing like straight comedy and like something really screwball, kind of like Will Ferrell style comedy, or you see yourself more as a dramatic kind of actress?
You know, I would have never imagined myself ever doing comedy, until Ugly Betty came around, and then there was a season there where it got quite screwball-y. It's a whole other conversation, but. And it was so much fun. Like, it was so fun to do screwball comedy. And I was sort of like, why would you ever want to, like, be on a show where you have to show up and cry every day, or, like, talk about, like, rape victims and, like, you know. So I never really knew how much I loved comedy until I did Ugly Betty, and I actually had a lot of fun doing this movie that we screened in October at the Austin Film Festival here called It's a Disaster, which is #1 on iTunes right now, by the way. So if you haven't seen it, go to iTunes and watch it. It's very funny. It's with David Cross and Julia Stiles and a group of improv comedians who hail from Austin. They're awesome. They're called The Vacationeers, Todd Berger and his buds. And that was just a straight-up comedy with lots of comedians and everybody with their own style. And that was super intimidating to me because, as you said, mainly if I'm doing comedy, it's coming out of a, you know, like it's drama with a little bit of comedy or something like that. So that was kind of a scary challenge for me, but, you know, it was really fun and the movie turned out great. But I don't know. I don't really consider again, like, I can't tell you, you know, what I want to do or what I want to be. And I just, when I see something that connects in some way, then that's what I go for. And platform means less and less these days. You know, before it was, oh, I'll never do TV, or oh, now I only want to do cable, or, you know, but now with formats like, you know, what's happening on Hulu, what's happening on Netflix, what's happening on, you know, even Amazon now is going to start creating their own original content. You see actors not really caring what the platform is. It's where's the good content and who's making good content, and people will find that content. We know how to find that content now. So you rely less and less on it being on a particular network, or how is this going to be released. You know, people will find it if it's good, I think.
All right, I lied. One more question, and then we're done. Anybody? I can't see this side of the room at all. There is one back there. Go ahead. if you're the guy with the question.
No.
Go ahead, right over here.
Well, as a college student and who's also struggling to decide, do I want to stay in school or do I want to take a career path, why was it important to you to finish your degree, especially with a 6-year lag?
Yeah. Well, as I've said before, I am a big nerd, and I enjoyed school even when I was a kid and didn't really have a context for it. But you know, I studied international relations in college, and that was something else that I really was passionate about. But I pursued acting and started having success in acting, so that's the road I went down. And then inevitably, this other passion that I had for, you know, engaging in international politics in the world started bleeding through, and in really unexpected ways, because I was, you know, on TV, had some notability. I was able to bring attention to the things I really cared about, getting involved in, you know, political campaigns and organizations like Go to Latino and Save the Children and the One campaign, you know, for all these different causes that I really cared about, realizing like, oh, this is a part of me that is really important to me. Like I can't just be an actor because that's one part of who I am, but I actually love engaging in the world. And I realized I didn't want to cut myself off or limit myself as a person because it didn't make sense in the career path that I had chosen. And really realizing that passion for me was something I cared about and I wanted to pursue simultaneously and not limit myself with a career label. So it was important for me to go back and finish school because I am considering going back for a graduate degree in public diplomacy or something like that to continue pursuing my other passions as a person, and so that's why that was important to me.
All right, there she is, America Ferrera.